Billy Hogan, Chief Executive of Liverpool Football Club. Welcome to the SportsPro podcast.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, we're glad to have you, of course. And I'd be interested just to hear a little bit about your career that led you to Liverpool Football Club and Fenway Sports Group, because you've been working at Liverpool for over a decade, and I believe you were part of the acquisition team, the FSG acquisition team, when it bought the club. But let's go back a little bit further. How did you get your start in sport and your career as a whole that ultimately led you to FSG in Liverpool?
Yeah. Yes. No. You're accurate around that. We can touch on it. But so going back, it was always something. My goal was to work in sports. I think that's probably a number of folks out there probably have a similar goal. And I think, as I say to people oftentimes, the hardest part about working in sports is actually just getting into the industry. And I was fortunate enough back in the early 2000s to start working for a sports marketing company called ANC Sports, which was based in New York. I was in an office up in Boston. A guy named Mark Lev, who I have to thank, hired me to come work for ANC. And about a year and a half later, actually, FSG had come in and bought the Red Sox back in 2002. And they started a part of FSG, which remains today, which is called Fenway Sports Management, which is essentially an internal agency within FSG. It's really focused on the assets and the properties that exist within FSG. And so in 2004, I was hired into FSM. Fenway Sports Management, actually was the first employee of FSM, and helped start that agency. And I guess the rest is history. Been with the organization for coming on 20 years now, and it's been an incredible ride. I think the time at FSM was really focused on, as I said, how could we help drive the different assets of FSG, and those assets have grown over time. So obviously there was the Red Sox in 02 and New England Sports Network, which is a regional sports network. And then, as I said, over time that's grown. So in 2007, we acquired 50% of a NASCAR team, which was at the time called Roush Racing. It's now called RFK Racing. And then, I was part of the acquisition team in 2010 that looked at Liverpool. It was a very quick process. We started the due diligence and the process in early August of 2010, and we finished and closed on the club on the 15th of October of 2010, so just over 60 days from start to finish. And then that sort of transitioned into a role with Liverpool on the commercial side. And then I started with the club, as you said, just over a decade ago. I've been with the club now 11 years. I started full-time in 2012 and came in initially as the chief commercial officer, and then was the chief commercial officer and managing director. And then 3 years ago, came into the CEO role.
Great stuff. And we'll touch on your transition from CCO to CEO. But I'd be interested to hear, when you first joined the club, having acquired it, it had been through an interesting time, shall we say, under the previous ownership.
Yep.
There was a lot of disgruntled fans. There was a lot of skepticism about the direction of the club. So coming into that environment, what was it like entering that? What were your priorities when you came in? Was it about putting your vision on the table, speaking to the fans? What were your priorities when you came in?
Yeah, I think going through the process, and look, it was very public. Liverpool was, I guess fair to say, had been mismanaged and was heading towards bankruptcy and heading towards administration. And they were going through a process where they were actively trying to sell the club. And so I think it's fair to say that we as FSG came into that process fairly late in that process, and in fact, sort of had we not closed in mid-October, I think by the end of the month, in fact, I think at the end of October, they were actually going to put the club into administration. So it was bleak, and from our perspective, I think we were convinced about the size and scale of the club and the opportunity that existed. I think we didn't quite appreciate how big the club actually is, and having worked for the club now for, as you say, over a decade, I've now experienced that. I don't think we could have even imagined it at the time, but the opportunity that we saw was one where a truly global club like Liverpool. And I think we have had experience with managing sports assets and managing sports properties, and trying to do that in a sustainable way. It's a word we use a lot, but really, focusing on three main things. The first and foremost is the football, and in sports, ultimately winning is has to be your goal, and that's certainly our goal across FSG. It's our goal at Liverpool, and so first and foremost is focusing on the football. Secondly was looking at the infrastructure, so Anfield, the training facilities, the offices for the employees, the club superstore, you name it. There just had not been investment in the infrastructure, so we felt like there was a significant opportunity there. And then finally was probably the commercial side, and I think that was the term sleeping giant was used a lot during the sort of sales process, and I think that was something that ultimately has proven to be true. That there was a lack of investment in the commercial side of the club and the opportunity to drive revenue and a return. That our mindset is that we work as hard as we can off the pitch to help what happens on the pitch, and if we can drive revenues and we can help support what Jurgen and the coaching staff and the football operations team ultimately need to do, and then now Matt Beard and the team on the women's side as well, that's really our goal. So those three areas were really the focus: the football, the infrastructure, and the commercial. And then you have to once we acquired the club, then it's really just about putting your head down and working as hard as you can to try and make those things happen. It's not easy. This is, I think the world today, it looks for sort of instant gratification and instant turnaround. These things take time. And, fortunately, we've been pretty successful over the course of the last, decade plus.
Yeah, so it's looking for new opportunities, and I guess for you, taking a crash course in Bill Shankly, Bob Paisley.
Yeah, exactly. For sure. Yeah.
Stuff. And when you made that transition from CCO to CEO, you were appointed in the middle of the pandemic, I believe. So
early on, yeah.
Open-ended question just to start, but how was that, into making that transition and I guess working from your living room?
It was. Look, the pandemic was obviously challenging for everybody, but certainly not necessarily the ideal time to come into your first role as a chief executive officer, but. I think, like every organization, I think it was sort of a game-changing time for everybody. There's no playbook for how to deal with something certainly that impacted everyone globally, but from a live, mass participation, mass audience, live events business, clearly that was something that was devastating from our standpoint. And I think our mindset at the time, I know our mindset at the time was really about sort of, again, kind of trying to prioritize where you are spending the majority of your time. Part of the issue at the time, and everyone has the ability to sort of look back now and sort of think through what those timelines look like. But the biggest issue for us is we didn't know how long any of it would last, and how long we wouldn't be able to play to start with. And that was kind of the first focus, was getting back on the pitch and figuring out, Project Restart, as it was called, and how was that going to happen. Secondly, then, was how long were we going to play behind closed doors? How were we going to move the teams around? How are we going to protect people? How are we going to protect our own people? And so when you think about all of that, all of those issues, it was really about trying to distill it down into, what are the things that we can ultimately control and how can we try and execute against those. So clearly the football piece of it was important. We need to be playing football, so how do we get to that? Secondly was, focus on our people, and how could we make sure that we protected people's jobs and their livelihoods, and we didn't know, again, how long things would last. Obviously, match day revenue being completely eliminated was something that was clearly a huge concern. So, and then also our community, and how could we make sure that during the time, and again, not knowing how long it would last, but how could we make sure that we were continuing? We're a huge part of the Merseyside and wider area, and making sure that we're impacting our residents, our constituents, if you will, our neighbors. And so, yeah, those were kind of the three areas. And I think, we spent a tremendous amount of time, the team off the pitch, if you will, that I lead. We spent a lot of time focusing on, what were the costs that we could eliminate? How could we make sure that we kind of strip the business back to its core? And then I think also, look, the technology was a big part of that as well, and opportunities that we could take from that in terms of still being able to deliver against a lot of our sponsorship commitments by hosting Zoom chats, which 4 years ago no one was doing, and now it seems like a part of daily normal life. So yeah, it was a challenging time for sure, but I think we have a really good group of people at the club, people that care tremendously, not just about the success on the pitch, but the impact that we have as an organization. And that was really the focus is, how do we make sure that we just continue to operate in the best way possible going forward?
And embracing the unprecedented, I guess, as well.
Yeah, I think that's part of, in my case, it's part of the leadership challenge. I think, football is a challenging environment in and of itself, but I think when you throw a global pandemic into the mix, that changes it. And I think also we had the benefit, we talked about FSG, we had the benefit of other organizations within the wider organization. And so I spent a lot of time talking to, Sam Kennedy, who's the CEO of the Red Sox, and talking about, what they were doing and, what were the other organizations within FSG doing. So I think there was a real coming together, not just within FSG, but a number of different leaders that I spoke with over the course of those early months, where people were just grappling with, how do you continue to move forward, and again, how do you kind of focus on those priorities, and making sure that you're doing everything you can to keep the organization moving forward. And ultimately, I think when we came out of it, so to speak, and I do think that we are, we're seeing it across a number of different areas of our business, that we're back to sort of pre-pandemic levels. I think the club emerged as strongly as it possibly could have, given the circumstances.
We had Sean Harvey and Humphrey Kerr speak at SportsPro Live back in April for
Yeah.
Wrexham FC, and they said when Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney came in, obviously they were new to football and they were bitten by the bug, and they've said it's the best and worst drug ever. Obviously they're owners, so they've got even more skin in the game. Yeah. But I guess for you, have you been bitten by the bug? And if so, are you able to detach yourself from that? Because when it's the highs are so high and the lows can feel even lower. But do you feel you're able to sort of put it in a box at the end of the day, or is it?
No. Well, at least not for me. No, look. I'm a competitive person anyway. I've grown up playing sports. I like to win. That's sort of just part of my DNA. And obviously, when you're involved in sports, there's a very clear result at the end of every match or game, whatever that might be. And so it's hard to put it in a box, I think. And the highs are incredible, and we've had incredible highs at Liverpool over the course of certainly the recent history. And the lows, I think, are probably lower than the highs. It's sometimes harder to get over the losses than it is to celebrate the wins. I think that's actually one lesson that I've definitely taken from particularly the last several years, is to really enjoy the moments when you are succeeding on the pitch. And I think that football is so consistent and relentless in a sense, right? The season starts. Here we are in the preseason. We just finished the previous season, kind of 8-9 weeks ago. So it is a weekly and sometimes, multiple times a week sort of report card that you get. And I think one of the things which from a leadership perspective, from our executive team perspective, is to try and think about not just the here and now, but the long term, and what are we doing as it relates to achieving our goals and our priorities and objectives. But yeah, when I left the States, I was if you came to our house, you would have seen the TV on most times. There would have been some event, some sports competition on, whether that was baseball, obviously with the Red Sox, or American football, hockey, basketball, you name it, the TV would have been on. And if you come to our house now, it's football. That's what we watch. And it is. I think it's a good description of it. It does kind of get into you, and sort of once you're hooked, it's difficult to switch it off.
Yeah, tell me about it. As I said, they're the ups and they're the downs, and it has been a great period of success for Liverpool. Last season, maybe not gone quite as well as you would have wanted, but they're a team in transition, and you're making positive. The framework is in place to then continue that success. I guess as a CEO of a football club, you're always going to be under the spotlight, and how. I guess when things maybe don't go as well as you've liked, you're always going to be under scrutiny from the fans, which I guess is a unique part of the job for anybody that works in sport. Was that something you were prepared for? And I guess how do you deal with that, and things maybe don't go quite as well as you'd like?
Yeah, look, I think as I said, you get kind of a weekly understanding of where you are in terms of results on the pitch. I think sometimes obviously results on the pitch can be difficult. I think that's part of the passion and energy, and certainly from our standpoint, we're very fortunate, and I consider myself incredibly fortunate to be in the position I'm in. But with that obviously comes the pressure of performance and the pressure of winning. I think that's the mindset at Liverpool is, we are focused on winning trophies. We're focused on silverware. As you said, we've been, very successful over the course of the last several years, and that's something that we're intent on continuing. Look, that's part of the job. And I think the most important thing from my perspective and, from our perspective as a club is to be focused on, what are we trying to achieve? And sometimes, matches can go different ways for various different reasons. And I think that is, again, that's a, kind of a every couple of day type of result. But, we also need to be focused on what are we trying to achieve over the long term. And ultimately, we're trying to run the club in the best possible way we can. And, said it before, but from a sustainable standpoint to ensure that everything we do is in the best interest of the club. And if we can continue to kind of have that mindset, then yeah, look, there's going to be criticism, there's going to be pressure, but that's part of working in an environment which is as public as it is, and so that's kind of, I guess, in a sense, sort of comes with the territory. And you got to, as I said before, you got to keep your head down, keep going, and keep working hard to do the best you can for the club. And I know that the team that I get to work alongside at the club cares, and cares incredibly about, certainly they care about results on the pitch, but they also care greatly about the club itself and doing the right thing for the club.
Given the relentless schedule, the scrutiny, everything else, how do you switch off? Can you?
Switching off is challenging. I think if you ask my wife, she'd say I probably don't. But yeah, I think one of the things, I've got a great family. I've got 4 kids that I spend as much time as I can with. That's challenging given our schedules sometimes, but it is something that you have to. I'm getting better at it. I think it's always a challenge. Exercise actually is one of the things that I do that frankly was incredibly helpful during the pandemic. I got a Peloton just before the pandemic started, and that was a huge help. But yeah, I think it's trying to spend time with family and spending time working out. And actually, we were one of those families that had the pandemic pet added to the family dynamic. So we've got a dog now, and actually that's something I really enjoy when I'm home, having the sort of a late dog walk at the end of the night, which actually gives you a chance just to kind of clear your head, and whether it's listening to a podcast or just going out for a walk. And so yeah, those are some of the things you try and do. But look, these are it is relentless. It's 24/7, 365, and again, that's part of the world we live in.
taking time to enjoy the little things still. I guess.
Absolutely, yeah.
And remarkably on brand, mentioning Peloton, considering they've just done a commercial deal with Liverpool. So that's
Yeah, well, I'm a fan of the product, so I'm glad we were able to get the deal done. But we're thankful to add them to the Liverpool family.
absolutely seamless mention. And I guess staying motivated probably isn't a difficult thing.
Yeah, no, motivation is not a challenge. I think you wake up every morning with a passion to continue to drive the club forward, and I think clearly it always comes back to the performance on pitch and winning. And I think the thing about winning is the more you win, the more you want to win, and it kind of becomes a bit of a drug. And so I think, we've always been chasing that. And I think we've had success over the course of the last several years. And so once you sort of taste that, you want to continue to continue to do it. And so, yeah, our team is incredibly motivated. And every business is different, obviously, but at the end of the day, you do have distinct seasons. And I think one of the things which we try and do, it's challenging given the way that the calendar kind of works, but is to make sure that people have a little bit of a chance in the off season to try and recharge a bit, try and get away a little bit, and then be ready, so to speak, for the season ahead. And that's really important too. We talked about sort of how do you kind of clear your mind a bit. And I do think that if you don't get those chances to get a little bit of white space, then that motivation piece becomes more challenging because it just feels, that relentless component of it. And so I think that ability to kind of come into each season almost with a fresh view and a fresh approach, from an off the pitch perspective, we have yearly objectives and priorities that we lay out and that we communicate, and obviously budgets that we need to hit, like any business. But I think all of that kind of helps you also to sort of create a new motivation for each season as you go into it.
And you've been in the role 3 years now, and when you came in, the club was odds on for the league. So I guess that must have helped a little bit, getting your feet under the desk.
Yeah.
But what kind of culture did you want to create? I guess you didn't need to change anything massively, but of course you wanted to put your stamp on it. What were your things that you really wanted to get across to the wider Liverpool staff when you came in?
Yeah, I think I guess it's probably different. I've only been the CEO of one organization. I've only had one sort of transition from one role into a CEO role, so I can't speak to what it would be like if you're coming in from outside an organization. But obviously I'd been with the club for 8 years prior to coming into the role in a senior leadership position. So as I said, we were in a pretty good place, generally speaking. And so there wasn't a massive amount that needed to be changed. I think, what I did initially, there's a couple things that I did. Number one is, I think, whenever you come into a new position, whenever you take on more responsibility, et cetera, I think the opportunity to learn from people who have already done it is something that I think is really valuable. So I was, here come the product mentions again, but I was really fortunate enough to have a number of different senior level CEO relationships with people like Bill Winters at Standard Chartered, and people like Case Hart at Carlsberg. And, so I actually sort of got a small group of CEOs together that I spent time talking to them about, how do they operate? What are their challenges? How do they think about leadership? And so that was really valuable to me, coming into the role initially. And then the other thing that we did, or I did, as coming into the role, was I basically did sort of a listening tour, as I called it, which, if you think about a football club, certainly from Liverpool's perspective, it's an interesting sort of dynamic because there's lots of businesses within a wider business. We have a merchandising business and retail stores. We have our partnerships business. We have a match day business, which looks at, what do we do in terms of selling tickets and hospitality. We have the stadium. We have all of our operations. So there's all these disparate parts which kind of come together ultimately in one club. And so I spent time, obviously I was very familiar with the commercial side of the club because I'd been working in it for 8 years, but it gave me an opportunity to almost reset and And so sort of the rules of engagement were, and I went and we did it over Zoom, obviously. So we were able to probably get to more people than maybe what you might have done if you're trying to organize in-person meetings. So maybe in that sense, technology was helpful. And we had, groups from each part of the business. It took several weeks to kind of do it, but the rules of engagement were basically that, it was kind of anything you wanted to talk about, anything you thought that we as an organization could improve. But you also had to come with some positive things that we were doing well. So it couldn't just be all negative, and had really good conversations. And so coming out of that actually gave me and gave us as a leadership team a real focus on what were things that we could do to improve the overall culture of the club. And one of those was probably internal communication, making sure that we were being open, honest, collaborative across the business, and what were we doing to share objectives and goals and kind of plan on a page, and how could we do those types of things. And so that was one area that we were really focused on. But yeah, it was it's I think the culture really, from my perspective, what I hope that we have is a collaborative culture, is one where people work together, people have a shared sense of purpose, and I know that that's the case because I know how passionately people feel about their work at the club, and that ultimately that we want this to be a great place to work. We want people to come into work. Yeah, of course, there's pressure around working for a football club, but that it's also something that people really relish, is to come in and accomplish their job on a daily basis.
Yeah, for sure. And just to finish, you've mentioned listening and learning, but I guess beyond that, what do you think are the fundamental kind of core principles for leadership and for people looking to improve in that area?
Yeah, I think from my standpoint, I guess it was, the idea around that kind of open, collaborative, working together with people that you know and trust. I think ultimately all businesses are based upon the people. I think it's about building really good teams. One of the things for me has been about making sure that you allow people to do their job. To let people have the autonomy to work in an environment where they feel empowered and they feel like they can fail fast if you're gonna try things, and if they don't work, that's okay, and you keep going. So that ultimately, I think from a leadership perspective, it's about building great teams, trusting your people, and ultimately, I think if everybody has a shared vision of what they're trying to accomplish, then you can really do great things.
And a lot of 3 points and a couple of trophies probably helps
yeah,
as well.
On a weekly basis, hopefully. Yeah, 3 points on a weekly basis. That's what we hope for. But ultimately, you're right. It's about trophies. That's what we're focused on.
Good stuff. Well, Billy, thanks for joining us. And
no problem.
Us at SportsPro APAC, and best of luck for the season.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.